Hey y'all, my name is Ann Wyatt. I started my career in workforce development with the state of Kentucky in 2010. That experience ignited a deep passion for manufacturing within me. I started this show hoping to raise more awareness around the bright outlook manufacturing careers have. Join me as I sit down with some of the manufacturing industry's most successful changemakers and learn how they're partnering people with technology. It's time to give people more meaningful work. This is Workforce 4.0. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Workforce 4.0. This is your host, Ann Wyatt, and today we are following up on the Schneider Electric Innovation Summit North America event that was held in Las Vegas back in November. And I'm so excited, and you all, it is such an honor for me to have Miss Carolyn Lee with us join the show today. And Carolyn, you are over the Manufacturing Institute, and I know that we were talking a little bit about this before the show, but I am such a fangirl of the work that you all are doing. I definitely try to get the word out about the amazing research and resources that you have available for the manufacturing community out there. But for those that maybe they're just not picking up the beat like they need to, can you give us a little bit more formal introduction of yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Anne. I appreciate you having me on. And I'm glad while we couldn't get together when we were in Vegas that we're able to do it here today. So the Manufacturing Institute is the workforce development and education affiliate for the National Association of Manufacturers. And our mission is to build and strengthen the manufacturing workforce for today and tomorrow. And so we do that through programs, through research, and through bringing and convening manufacturers to learn from one another about what the challenges are, what the different solutions of what's working when it comes to manufacturing workforce development. And really, our main audience are the manufacturers themselves. That's who we work on behalf of, because it's through good manufacturing jobs that people can build their lives. But we do that in partnership with companies of all sizes, of course, companies of all sizes, but education partners and community-based organizations all across the country. So it's great to be here, and I'm glad to get a chance to talk about all that's going on in the manufacturing workforce space.
I'm ecstatic to have you here because this is just right up my alley. And I know that, so much of your research and statistics and resources that you all publish and produce is absolutely the lighthouse for a lot of manufacturers, especially with this past year. So I know that that's been rough, but you all have definitely done a great job of supporting some encouraging resources there. But Carolyn, before we get really far into that conversation today, I've got to know. I feel like this would be a thing for us. I feel like if we were out somewhere and we maybe were at a conference or something, and then after the conference, I feel like, Carolyn, that you could be a good karaoke contender.
There's nothing. I'm a big cartoon person. My kids would laugh that I probably most of my singing happens in the car, but I definitely would enjoy karaoke. So if I had to go to it, what would I pick? Right. This is a question. I think this is a question of the ages. I'd have to show my 80s roots and say Bon Jovi, Living on a Prayer. But I feel like it's like one of the original karaoke songs.
I love that song so much. This is a great answer. Yes.
Yeah.
I would also want to either be singing in the audience or with you because
we'll do it next time. We're off we go.
It's so good. It's so good. Yeah. Love that song. Love what you all are doing. But let's talk a little bit more about that because you led a really great keynote at the Schneider Electric event. And I took notes. Of course I did. But some of the things and topics that you all were up there discussing really kind of shed a light on some of the transitions that we've seen in manufacturing over the last few years. But in your point of view, from your perspective, how are manufacturing companies successfully preparing for the people technology convergence?
Yeah. So, there's so much going on right now. And, It's funny. I get so many questions that are about the coming technology and robotics and AI is going to
Sure.
take all the jobs and all this narrative, which I don't agree with. And one of the things that I've been saying lately is, look, manufacturing's always been at the front of, emerging technology, right? The Industrial Revolution is about manufacturing. And so we have, as a sector, gone through change after change as new technology has come on. And so I think when you ask the average manufacturer, especially a large manufacturer, they would say they've been working with robotics and automation for many years now, right? This is not new. ChatGPT might have hit the scene just over 3 years ago, but it's not. So that aspect is new. I in that like large language models and generative AI is new. And in the last couple of years, however, machine learning and, imaging and using computers to look at small flaws in quality control. So, we have been using AI and technologies and the drone robots that move supplies all around, factory floors today. And the more, shop floors I go to, the more often I see them. About 5 years ago, you saw them only in the biggest of companies. Now you see them really in most companies. And so when you look at that, that's automation. That's AI, that's smart technology. And so this is just the next generation of that. Now, of course, it is very much front and center. We know that manufacturers in the back offices and the headquarter jobs, right, and the analyst jobs, innovation jobs, that people are using the large language models, all the different flavors of those. But on the shop floor today, it's not as widely prevalent using the generative AI. And so that's something that there is a gap. And one of the biggest reasons for that gap is not having the skill sets to be able to see the relevancy of deploying that. And so that's something that the MI is really looking at to see how we can help the sector. But look, manufacturers have been at the forefront of technology evolution and innovation, and it has not eliminated all people. I see people wherever I go. It has changed the nature of our jobs, and really for the better. When I talk to employees, and right before COVID, I was on a tour of a company, and I was talking to a manufacturer. So this was, technology circa 5 years ago. And I said to them, what do you think about the automation? They said, look, I've been in this sector for 40 years. I'm 65. I want to stay longer because the job is safer. It's interesting. I'm learning more in the last 5 years than I've learned my entire previous career. And I'm excited for what's to come. And so I think there's a really good story to tell about what technology is doing. Now we have to make sure we're trained for that. And that's something that we focus on every day. We need to make sure that people have the skills and the fluency and the literacy and the agility to be able to evolve with these skills. But when we talk about, and this is something that probably is dear to your heart, Anne, with your conversations here, but when we talk to students about the opportunity in manufacturing, you talk about the technology that we have, that's exciting to them, right?
It's
That can
really
help bring
exciting.
them in. So as we look to fill these jobs that we need to fill over this next decade, making sure that we're leaning into the opportunity that the technology brings is actually a benefit for manufacturing. And so it's something that I'm always singing from the mountaintops about, to help manufacturers know that these are things we should absolutely be talking about in the positive, because it is very positive for the sector and for our workers.
Absolutely. And that's really what it's about. Have you seen that reel going around? It's like this mom, I'm a mom, Carolyn, so I get
Me
all
too.
these reels about mom content. But have you seen that reel going around? It's this mom, she's running around the house picking up dirty socks. I mean, stuff that we do because kids, right? And the caption is like, when is AI taking my job?
You're
I would
right.
like to know.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Doing
Exactly. You know,
laundry.
for me, it's not that as much as it is the cups, the number of cups my children leave around the house, that I have to say, I broke down and I put coasters on the counter with post-it notes underneath each with each of their names on it. So like, this is where your cup goes. That's it. I'm
Oh, that's
tired of,
brilliant.
yes, and rearranging the dishwasher, but that's a whole nother podcast.
That it absolutely, absolutely it is. But yeah, I mean that's really kind of what we look forward to as humans, I think, with the
That's right.
technology and the
That's
emerging
right.
technology. Where can we improve on getting manufacturers on board with the technology, or even like the skills gap? Because that is something that I'm always on this show preaching about. Like, we've got to bridge the skills gap. But in your thoughts,
Yeah.
where are some things we can do to get better?
It's a great question. It's a conversation I've been having a lot lately, and good news is we have a lot of good examples. Manufacturers really need to lead this transition. We need to lead to the changes and drive and be in the driver's seat for the changes that we need to see in education and skills training. I grew up in a manufacturing family, and my dad and grandfather would have said that, you could hang a sign and people would come, that they had the skills coming out of high school that they needed. My grandfather, in fact, came right out of high school and went into manufacturing and then ultimately became a machinist. But, our jobs are different than they were, and they all require skills. There's many pathways to opportunity, but they all include and require skills. So how we're developing those skills, and manufacturing today cannot assume that every high school, every community college or technical school is going to know what exact skills that the manufacturers regionally need. As you well know, workforce is a local and regional issue. There is no federal lever that can be thrown that all of a sudden everything that ails us, is fixed. And That's it right. Really has to be solved within a 60-mile radius of your facility. And so, manufacturers being front and center, having that conversation with their local colleges and training partners to let them know what skills, which programs they value, where they will hire people out of, that is where the partnership comes together. We have a great model that is, I think, a perfect example of how this works and how we get manufacturers to lead the educational investments that we want. And that is our FAME USA, our FAME network. And that is our Federation for Advanced Manufacturing Education, and started by Toyota in 2010 to train its own maintenance technicians. As we come over to the MI since 2019, where we've doubled it in size, we now have over 40, I think it's over 42 chapters in 17 states, training thousands of students in maintenance for an AMT degree. And the good news is that it is really an employer-led model where the employers are driving that commitment, driving the training, working in concert with community college and then local, business entities to help support that network. And then you're growing the pool of talent, right? And you're building practices to solve this together so that we're not fighting over a shrinking pool. We're actually growing that pool, that pond. And so, I think that FAME, I use it all the time, as a great example for how manufacturers coming together can solve one of our biggest challenges. That's really over the long term, right? There's all sorts of different headwinds, and this year has been plenty of them. But workforce is going to be a durable challenge. We have a structural workforce challenge in this country. And so we have to grow the talent we need. They're not going to miraculously appear. And so manufacturers can help solve their problem, and the MI is here to help them do it.
So I've got a fun tip, or just a fun factoid, I guess. It's random. It's random. We're just going to throw this in here. But now, Carolyn, I am from Kentucky.
Okay.
I don't know if you know this.
I did not know that.
I worked for the state of Kentucky for 5 years in workforce development.
You know all about this.
So I actually worked with one of your employees, Kelsey.
I love Kelsey. Yep.
And I remember back when they launched FAME back in Franklin at the South Central Kentucky Community Technical College with Dr. J. And I remember when they launched that program back in like 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, probably.
And just watched it explode, and being part of that HR community and hearing the real life use cases, examples, whatever you want to call it, from the employers themselves, having so much success with that program. And I have been preaching and on one about FAME ever since. So I'm so grateful that you brought that up. And if you are listening to this podcast today and you are not aware of FAME and the work that they're doing, please, please, please go check it out, because
it is really it's an outstanding program. I didn't realize the Kentucky connection, but as soon as you said it, I'm like, of course you know all about this. And, Kentucky has done a great job rolling it out statewide. Alabama has a statewide FAME effort yep. And it is, I think Huntsville now has 2 chapters on either side of the city, because it's so much is going on in Alabama, particularly in that region. And, FAME, look, it's not a fast solution, but it is a durable solution. And it really does train global best maintenance techs. And now we also have a process technician pathway that's been operating down on the Gulf Coast for continuous process roles. And we know it works. And so we are looking forward to continuing to rapidly expand FAME, and there will be some news on that front in 2026. But it's a great program, and it's really to help manufacturers. This is one of the most in need roles, not just for manufacturers, but for any entity that has automated equipment. So grocery stores, distribution centers, health centers. And so there's huge competition for these roles that are really well paying. And you can go into that role and succeed, but you can also take that and springboard into additional training and learning and bigger jobs there too. So I love when I get to spend time with the FAME team and out in the FAME chapters and the network. It's really fantastic. And it's a great example of how manufacturers can drive the change. And then where we're doing that, how state governments and the federal government are able to come in behind and support it, but manufacturers have to be driving this. And so we're excited to help them do that. And that's what we do at the FAME USA team within the MI.
I love that so much. This is awesome. I love talking about FAME. I'm a huge fangirl, if I haven't mentioned that already. But the retention rates also that are coming out of this program are outstanding.
Yeah, we just have some new data the team shared with me. So I think it's 95% in the first year. And then at 3 years out, 88% of the graduates are still with the company that sponsored them, which is outstanding. Plus, and this is the biggest number, the most important number, I'd say, the graduation rate from FAME on time, and on time isn't with an extra year or two, which is usually how they count it for community college programs. It's actually 21 months, which is what the program is designated to be. And I think it's over 80% of students who come into FAME graduate in that 21 months and are on to a good paying, durable career. And with little to no, college debt, and an associate's degree. So it's this tremendous pathway that offers so much opportunity, and I look forward for it to be in every state. We're at 17 states. We got a little while to go.
Well, that's exciting. I'm of course going to keep up with all of that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And, maintenance techs have always been one of the biggest needs in manufacturing. And like you said, in other industries as well, distribution centers, anywhere where there's machinery.
Absolutely.
Like you're saying. But other than maintenance techs, have you seen any noticeable shifts in hiring needs within manufacturing companies this year in 2025 that have been in contrast to like previous years since COVID?
Yeah. So, going into COVID, we were at about 450,000 open jobs, I'd say, monthly. So maybe in 2019, it was about somewhere between 410 and 450. Then we hit COVID, and we were at, we had one quarter where, it was tremendous shock to the economy, and we had, 20 million Americans out of work, and everything went to stop. Manufacturing, everyone realized that manufacturing was essential. And so all sorts of facilities back opened. And so coming a year out of COVID, so we went into this ramp up of open jobs. So about 600,000. In August of 22, I think it was, we had nearly 1 million open jobs in our sector. And, COVID had accelerated retirements. So it was a dire issue for every manufacturer that we were getting so many calls, every single day. What do we do? What do we do? And how do we solve this? And of course, there is no simple solution. On the one hand, we need to tap into all the talent pools. We need to make sure we're bringing people in off the sidelines. We need to help people lower barriers to get access to skills. We need to tap into, veteran talent or second chance talent, or people who had left the workforce to be able to care for loved ones. And so all of these things were happening. Well, that was, I think, our high water mark, summer of 22. Since then, we have been tampering down. So about last year, I think it was, we had about 500,000 open jobs every month, up and down, but right around 500,000 on average. Right now, we're at about 415, I think. And what we found, it's still a lot, right? So we were at this crazy level when it was COVID. And so, of course, in our minds, that became this now, well, it's so much further down. Well, it's so much further down, but it's still really high. So, we still know that this is a big issue for manufacturers. It is, more than half of all manufacturers in the NAM Outlook survey for the fourth quarter of this year have said that attracting and retaining a quality workforce is a top concern. And so our work continues. continues, because this is going to be a durable challenge, and one that we need to continue. So, but the range of roles have really changed. So maintenance tech and high skilled jobs. So think welders, electricians, maintenance, things that require a high skill level. You would say machinists, all of those roles are still very much high in demand. On the other hand, operator level, so a little less lower skill level, still knowledgeable, those are also in demand. But one of the choke points we see in manufacturing that we've been hearing about for the last 2 years is actually frontline leaders, and making sure that we have that early level leader, because of course that is the person who interacts with the majority of your employees, and making sure that manufacturers have access to that talent is a really big priority, and something we've heard a lot about in the last year. And so that's something that I think for all of us, we really need to look into.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is something that I hear a lot too. Like and then we get into the conversations about, well, do we preserve tribal knowledge? How do we do that if we do? Or how do we train for that kind of thing? Or how do we, overcome that gap? And is the solution with training and development? Is it with, technology, all of those things? What do you think, in your opinion, what do you think are some of the best ways to tap into those resources for your frontline leadership?
Yeah. So actually earlier this year, I had to think for a minute, is this 26 yet? Earlier this year I think it was the first quarter 25, we put out a paper with PwC that really dug into, as part of a series we've done with them on frontline leaders. And this one really dug into what should frontline leaders do to make sure you're getting good employee engagement. So that's another thing that we've really seen a big shift in since COVID. Going into COVID, we were looking at the number of open jobs and the skills needed for those roles, of course, were front and center. Coming out of COVID, so much changed in like the zeitgeist about what people want out of work, right? Where do you work? The flexibility conversation, but also the meaning of work, right? We had a great, it was like one of those snowball shaking moments, right? Everything when we got into COVID. And so people realized, okay, wait, what am I working? What is the environment I'm in? And so culture became a huge topic of conversation. And so right now, I just gave a presentation last week to the MI board of directors. And one of the things I was talking to them about was, yes, the skills training expansion that we're doing going into next year, but also really leaning into culture and engagement. So now loop back to frontline leaders. Frontline leaders have typically been promoted because they are the best person at the job, right?
Right.
On that role. And then they
come to work every day.
That's right. And so they get promoted, but what they haven't necessarily received is the training to be a supervisor, the training on how to lead people, how to manage people, how do you communicate, how do you proactively communicate in a way that makes your employees want to come and then come back again, right? And then what do you do to help make sure that you're not just driving to the numbers of production you need, but you're actually developing that talent pool? What we see with our youngest cohort of our potential workforce, our Gen Zs, and this isn't a knock at all on Gen Zs. This is actually a good thing for all of us to appreciate, even us old middle-aged people in the sector. As I speak for myself, really looking at the values, the culture, the belonging at work, and how that is a driver of productivity, of improvement, of innovation, of making sure that your teams are successful. And so allowing that to be part of the conversation. That has been a big change since COVID. It's not on the technology side, but it's more in the human nature. I think we all learned a lot, and a lot of things shifted and people's values shifted when we had such a dislocating event. And so now, in order to be successful, employers of all sizes and all types need to really make sure they're leaning into culture and values and developing talent, because we're not going to get those Gen Z folks to come to our companies and stay if we're not finding development paths for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. I think that, the real struggle was the first of these battles was probably with millennials and with my generation, but Gen Z now, they're just, they're just like, I'm not doing it.
I'm not doing it. My oldest is 16, and she said to me, she's like, Mom, I know you love what you do and that's great, but I don't want to live to work. and I'm a Gen X, and I'm, at my head, I'm still lucky I have a job, and
Right.
I'm fortunate to be here, and I'll do and say yes and keep running. And the younger generation, and this is again not a knock. This is a good thing. They work so that they're able to enjoy their life, but it is not the purpose for a lot of folks, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So that means how do you give them something that's challenging, that's worthwhile, that they see as developing them as an individual and what they can bring and the ideas and the creativity, and it's going to make us more innovative. But it means that you can't say, your employee number 762, go back on the line. You need to say, okay, and what is it that you're interested in doing? This is a step on your journey. And when you engage them that way and let them bring their ideas to the table, you're going to get a really engaged employee who's going to bring more value to the organization. So it's it's definitively, I should say, mutually beneficial.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I know that most operation leaders that I speak with, their qualm with this, if you would, is we still have to get a product out the door.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and that is their number one focus.
Number one job.
So how do we find solutions to maybe aid in that work-life balance or career path, like you're saying, or how do we kind of make both parties happy?
There's some great data about how engaged teams are more productive. And so with that as a baseline, and we've done a lot of work over the last couple of years, as I said, since COVID, with papers, and they're all over the MI's site. It's the manufacturinstitute.org is the website. And, how people feel connected to their teams, that they colleagues at work that they are close to, how that helps with belonging and engagement, right? How that helps build the culture of teams and keeps people coming back and innovative and productive and all the things. But when it goes to your exact question of career pathing and really culture and development, in manufacturing for a long time, we have not necessarily laid out, if you do this work in 2 years, this is your next step, right? It's, and yet that is to our detriment. We have a program, it's called Heroes Make America, and we've been working with the transitioning military population and veterans in helping them get training and alignment of their military experience into manufacturing careers and then placed in manufacturing roles. And it's a tremendous program. It's been hugely rewarding. We've been doing this since 2018. One of the things that I've learned from our military personnel who've come through the program is, when you're in, we do a lot with the Army, when you're in the Army, you do this job, you do this for this long, and now you're eligible, especially if you get these additional skills, to this next level. And then you have a ladder that you can climb through. And what we've been saying for years is you come in the private sector, it's a little bit more choose your own adventure. Except when we see this generational data for the millennials and the Zs who want to know what the opportunity is, there's some good data out there. The American Opportunity Index is a research paper that a couple foundations put together with Burning Glass Institute. I think they're coming out with their third one. Will be out in January. A couple of years ago when they first launched, one of the data points that I love, that I use all the time, is that employees are more likely to stay, 2/3 more likely to stay if they've learned something in the last 6 months, right? And so when you look at what development paths look like for people who have been in HR, they're thinking that means there has to be a promotion track. But what research and what data says, we talk to employees, is that if they can get a new skill, if they can get a new opportunity, if they can, maybe they are not ready for a promotion, but they're the person you could go and be at the recruiting fair at a high school, right? And that young employee who's excited about the work, and they could be the voice of the company. And that says to that employee, hey, we see you, we recognize your capabilities and what you bring. And it's not a promotion, it's not necessarily a skill set, but it is an opportunity. And how do you lay those things out for individuals who are motivated so that they know that you are willing to invest in them? Because for our youngest cohorts of workers, millennials and Zs, if you are not investing in them, they will go look for a firm that will. So it is no longer, this is optional. This is now what we need to do to be able to engage. Now, you were very right that, of course, at the end of the day, production leaders are responsible for production. And I was raised in a manufacturing family, and productivity is like a value I hold very dear to my heart. And so the thing is that we have to meld the desire for our workforce now, our potential workforce, for flexibility, with the needs of production. And it does not mean that everybody has to be able to work remotely, because that doesn't work in production. I get that. But what does it mean? Maybe it's you're looking at how you schedule hours. Maybe it's how you schedule shifts. Maybe it's that your shift time changes and that there's a swing shift, or that it starts maybe when the school bus leaves in the morning, so that working parents are able to pick up that extra time. Maybe it's that you set a schedule for 6 months. Maybe it's like the airlines and you can swap. And I'm looking at your schedule and looking at mine. I'm like, oh, I'll swap this with you. And that means you need to know what skills people have so that you can make adequate swaps. So the good news is there's a lot of technology out there. There's a lot of the kind of the gig work apps, but there's also a lot of scheduling technologies that will help production leaders bring this to life. And those companies that we've worked with that have done this have found it hugely beneficial. They're engaging a bigger population of potential workers. Maybe that's that parent who has of school age kids who now can work, but before they couldn't. And it gives them the opportunity to really make sure that they are meeting or showing the employees that they are interested in making this all work out and investing in them and trusting them. And that's going to help make it a more engaged employee. So we have a white paper on flexibility on the site that's from about a year ago, but all of the data still holds true and the methods hold true. But it's an ongoing conversation. And look, it's the reality. So we could say, never mind, we're going to ignore all of this, but it's going to make it harder to find the people and keep the people you need. So we're here to help manufacturers make these jumps in this culture and wade through it, so that we make sure we're able to retain our most important resource, our workers.
I love that. I love that so much. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of creativity that you could apply here, and I love some of those solutions. So I'm really looking forward to reading some of this research and seeing how companies have successfully applied that. I think I've read a few of those case studies, but it would be good to probably brush up on some of the ones that you've released earlier this year. Yeah. Definitely.
And, one thing that we've been doing that's new this last year is actually something that your friend Kelsey works on that you mentioned earlier. We have what we call our Solutions Center, and we've been convening monthly events, webinars mostly, for manufacturers to dig into these thorny things with other manufacturers, to learn what their peers and colleague companies are doing, so that you can hear from another production leader, well, how are you managing flexible scheduling in the production environment, right?
I love that.
Which seems like a hard bar. And so to hear it from somebody else who has done it successfully. And so our solution series events are really to help manufacturers of all sizes learn from one another and share those solutions. Because look, as you well know, in manufacturing, it's about continuous improvement. And we don't have time to recreate the wheel. We got to get out there and get it done. So let's learn from one another. And that's one of the key roles for the MI. And we're very happy to do it. And there's more of that to come in 2026.
I love that. And Kelsey would be such a good resource for that too. I could see her being very good at organizing that kind of thing. Perfect. Well, Carolyn, I really appreciate you being on the show today. I do have one more question for you if you have time. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's totally
okay. Fine. Okay. So I know that, we've talked a lot about the past in workforce development and the skills gap. And, I definitely want to look at the future as well. But what are where are we currently with the skills gap in manufacturing? What is our current state? And maybe how has that shifted, some improvements that we've made? And then any projections that you have going into 2030?
Yeah, that's a big one. So right now, the best data on the talent gap manufacturing, and this sounds very self-serving, but it continues to be the MI Deloitte regular paper that we do. Our most recent one on the talent gap. So the most recent one was from May of 24 is when we released it, which seems like eons ago, to tell you the truth. It is that time what we've forecasted was that by 2033, we would need to fill 3.8 million jobs. And of those, 1.9, so half, would go unfilled because we don't have the people with the skills. So at that time, when we did that work, we had just taken into account the Infrastructure Act under the Biden administration, the CHIPS Act, Deficit Reduction Act from post-COVID, like the COVID response and recovery bills. So at that time, we were projecting that number based on those government investments and all the jobs that were going to be created, particularly from things like chips.
Right.
think of everything that's happened from the federal government side since then. So obviously President Trump has put a huge emphasis on bringing more manufacturing, reshoring, and back to the U.S. Right now, we would say there's always been manufacturing here, but he's certainly emphasizing bringing more. And all these announcements that we hear every week almost about companies who are investing in new plants and facilities. So when we do this updated paper, which will be in 27, I think I predict it's going to show a much bigger number because our retirements will have continued because manufacturing is an older sector of the economy still. So I think that number will be a little bit higher. And then all of this onshoring, reshoring, and all this domestic investment are going to create new jobs. And so we are still chipping away at that. So now there will be some who will say, of course, all these jobs are going to be replaced by technology. And I don't believe that to be the truth. I know that technology will shift jobs, but a great example is when Microsoft brought out Excel, all the accountants in the world did not get fired. In fact, accountants now use Excel to do their job. So there are going to be some shifts. It might be a little bit like the buggy whip maker, right? That those roles aren't needed anymore because something else has come in. But what we know in manufacturing, particularly with this big of a talent challenge, we know that when automation comes on board at a facility for a job, they're able to take that worker and shift them into another. And so the durability of manufacturing jobs continues to be high, especially when you have skills. Skills are indeed the coin of the realm. So investments in those skills and those tangible skills are really important. And so I continue to see that we will have a need. I'm hoping that the existing talent gap will shrink while that we will get an expanded gap because of all the new investment, but that the work continues to make sure we're developing that talent pool so manufacturers can succeed, because that's what makes our communities and our country strong. So that's what we're here doing every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of great points that you brought up there, not just with the CapEx investments, which, is interesting enough, right? Because there is so much pressure for them to reshore and nearshore, but also with the federal dollar and funding that has already been put out there really back in January, or maybe it was like close to March of 2025 of this year.
Right.
With some large grants funding as well.
Yeah.
So we've got that coming, and
That's
there's probably going to be more of that coming down the pipe. So it'll be very interesting to see how we transition a lot of the frontline workforce into more skilled positions as well.
Right.
That's 3 million is a lot.
Yep. Yeah. And it's, our sector, we're just about 12.8 million workers. So if we need to fill 3.8 positions, that's a big chunk of it. A lot of that's going to be retirements. A lot of that is job growth. And so there's a lot of opportunity here. So we have our work cut out, and it's through partnerships that we're going to get the word out. We're going to help build those training ecosystems. We're going to develop that talent. And really, we're going to also make sure, I'll go back to the mom videos you mentioned before. We need to make sure that parents, moms and dads, and other influential, adults in people's lives see that there is a value in manufacturing careers and that there's a good durable pathway, and away we go. So there's a lot of work for all of us out there together.
Absolutely. Are you excited?
I am. I'm excited about what we do every day. I'm excited about the growth and the energy. And, I knew growing up that everything we had was because of my dad's, good manufacturing career. And I'm excited that at the MI, we have the opportunity to help other families build their future and make sure that our companies and that make the things we rely on every single day possible. And so, I do think there's a good success story. I mean, there's always headwinds, but our job on workforce development is making sure that we're building those talent pools.
Love that. I love that so much, Carolyn. Again, I really value you being on the show today. This has been such a fun conversation for me. For those that are out there listening and they want to connect with you or they want to learn more about the Manufacturing Institute, what is a good point of contact?
I would say you can find me on LinkedIn, Carolyn Lee. It's the Manufacturing Institute. And then our website is www.themanufacturinginstitute.org. And you can also just email institute@nam.org with any questions. And we're here to help.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Carolyn. This has been an awesome conversation. I can't wait to share it with the masses. For everybody listening in on this week's episode, we really appreciate you. And please, please, please follow the work that Carolyn and her entire team at Manufacturing Institute are doing. It is amazing. We'll see you all next week on another episode of Workforce 4.0.